right. Thank you so much for everyone who has joined today. Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining. I know it's a very sensitive topic. Thank you for wearing white and this, but it's we are talking about mortgage fraud today, and we don't want this video to be or this webinar to be very negative. What we want is to give a little bit of education and color around, or some perspective around what mortgage fraud is. We all saw, and most of us actually saw what happened with at CBC, and it's sad, and it puts the entire mortgage a bad light. And one of the things that we need to realize is it's not all bad, and not all people are bad. Something that happens, and we'll talk about that. I have a lot of questions of my own. I'm sure people here would have a lot of questions of their own, and we'll just get started. So Matthew, any initial thoughts on what we saw on CBC?
I didn't love that segment, that's for sure. A couple reasons, really. One, it really hyper targeted the South Asian community, and I think that was incorrect because that's only a portion of where mortgage fraud comes from, a small portion in Canada, right? And unfortunately in Ontario and in parts of BC, it's the portion that has disproportionately carried the most blame for it historically, right? I am going to make no apologies for the industry. The industry is racist as all get out. Period. It is. It always has been. It always will be. Right. Until we take the efforts to change that from the inside. Right. Mm-hmm. I think that it was inflammatory in regards to let's target the finance industry at a time when the finance industry is under high levels of scrutiny due to interest rates, right? And let's create a scapegoat, perhaps, or put through a scapegoat mindset as to why these rates might be increasing, indirectly. And then three, it is a topic that we talk about in the business, but we don't talk about it openly very much. And there's a couple reasons why brokers don't talk about it openly very much. And one is it's not super interesting, the behind the scenes side of it. But two, when we talk about fraud, we're normally talking about, I don't do it. I'm innocent. Right. That's not what we need to be talking about. What we need to be talking about is how do we protect our consumers from getting caught in it? How do we protect our clients from becoming victims of, or, allow bad actors to encourage them in a direction that will lead towards fraudulent behavior, right? And what are some of the warning signs, right? Who cares if the broker is... no one needs me going on social media today and saying, I don't commit mortgage fraud. I've never committed it. Something we've talked about for years, yada, yada. No, what we're here to really talk about more is, Nav, how can I equip you and your audience with the tools necessary to avoid it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's my first question, right? Yeah. So as a first-time home buyer, let me just, put a little bit more color before I ask this question. So as a first-time home buyer, we are so new to the country, so much so that people do not understand the difference between a mortgage agent and a realtor. And because they are buying a house, they are just calling the realtor, and which is correct, right? So that's what happens with a lot of my partners as well, who I'm working with, and they then direct them to a mortgage agent. So there's a lot of, I won't say misinformation, but lack of information thereof when you're buying your first house. And therefore, I think it's very important to also understand what are the red flags. Now, Matthew, in India, we have something called as jugaad. Jugaad basically means that, you fix something, right? If I'm not able to make time to meet you, I'll have some jugaad, and, so it's used very loosely.
Okay.
And some people actually might think that this is jugaad. So, when you are committing income fraud or whatever, it's jugaad, but it's a crime, right? And we need to have some red flags there. So in your, experience of being in the industry for 2 decades, what are the biggest red flags that people need to know as first-time home buyers?
So there's a couple things that you really need to know. One is that the only people that are allowed to talk about mortgages are mortgage agents who carry a license, right? Or someone who works for a recognized big bank.
Right.
So the only two people that are allowed to talk about mortgages: your financial planner, your realtor. They are not allowed to talk about this, right? They're not allowed to go into interest rates. They're not allowed to talk about terms. They're not allowed to talk about documentation, right? It's right against the rules. You must have a license with FSRA in Ontario, and you must be insured with Arizona Emissions Insurance in order to discuss the contents of a mortgage, right? If I have an unlicensed assistant working for me, that person's not even allowed to talk to you about the content of a mortgage, right? Only someone who's licensed is able to, or they work for a financial institution.
Right.
You know, lawyers have a little leeway in this, but they're more allowed to talk about the administration of mortgage, the collection of funds, right? And allocation of funds they're allowed to speak to, and so they've got an exemption. But a realtor or a financial planner is not, right? And so the moment they start talking to you about mortgage details, you start to have a problem, right? So, you know, everyone needs to be in their lane. You know, never trust someone that seems nonchalant when you talk about having bad credit or bad employment. This is a red flag in the industry, is, you know, my credit's bad or my employment's bad. Well, that should concern the person you're talking with, right? If it doesn't concern them, if it doesn't faze them, if they wave it off, you've got a problem already, right? Because the moment I hear, hey, you know, I've got an income concern, what I need, the response is, I need you to speak with this person. Right. And that's the response that it should be, right? Is let's go get this dealt with first, right? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things. Like, I mean, research your realtors, always. Research everyone you do business with, always, right? If I'm being referred to work from someone with someone else, I research. I don't take it on good faith alone, right? I'm going to look into who they are. So there's a database for all mortgage professionals out there. There's a database for all realtors out there. Anyone who's got a license to function in real estate is part of this database. You can see if they're in good standing or not. Right. It's important to be aware of, right? And if you feel that you are being taken advantage of, all brokers have a principal broker that they work for, right? And the principal broker is also known as the chief compliance officer for a mortgage brokerage. Their job is to ensure that everyone who works for them is compliant to FSRA or the oversight body standards, right? So if I gave you information and you were really uncertain about it, you would go to Tracy Velko, who is both mine and Navjot's principal broker, and you reach out to her directly with a complaint. Hey, listen, I don't think the information I've received is good. Can you please follow up on this, right? And by law, the principal broker is responsible to deal with these concerns and claims, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things, Matthew, sorry, you know, I'm cutting you there, but one of the things that I really feel is that, and that came up in the video that we saw at CBC as well, that they were charging, you know, 1% of whatever fee. Now, a lot of times when people call me, they actually ask what your fee is. And, you know, one thing is, you know, it's very weird. You know, I think 5 out of 10 calls that I get, they ask me what my fee is. Now, part of it is because they don't understand how mortgage agents, you know, or for that matter, realtors earn money, and the buyers are not the one who are paying them in most cases, right? So, and
my case is a little different, but yeah.
And then there's lack of information on when is it that what kind of fee can be charged. So let's talk about let's peel this back. Let's go fully transparent here and, you know, scare the crap out of any mortgage agent that's watching this today. So the standard pay that a mortgage agent makes on a deal is about 1% of the mortgage amount, not the property price, right? Any institutional lender like a bank, right? Any monoline lender, so they pay directly to the broker, right? And they pay in around 1%, give or take. You know, there's bonuses and negatives depending on relationships that the brokerage has, but 1% is standard, right? Mortgage agents should not make more than about 1% on a file, period. Okay? So then it'll be all. There are some lenders, alternative lenders,
that might pay the broker 0.5%.
Right.
And in those situations, the broker will typically charge through a difference to the client. What's standard? Normally, and I've been blamed for being a little bit undervalued sometimes when it comes to charging fees, but the standard is $2,500 as a floor price, up to about 0.5%, 0.75%, depending on the difficulty of the file, right?
Right.
Then there's private lenders, right? I have a database of private lenders that I go to. They're institutional, like a mortgage investment corporation, or people that have a ton of money that have been properly sourced and have passed our criteria to lend their money. And on those deals, typically, again, I have a floor of about $3,000 is the base price, up to about either 1% or standard on a hard deal. We're probably about $5,000-$6,000 on a hard deal, right? Under no circumstance should you pay a mortgage agent upfront funds, period. Hard stop, right?
Yeah.
Now, FSRA lets us collect upfront up to on mortgages over $400,000, right? That's fine. That's the law, right? If your mortgage broker is doing that, fire them, because there's a ton out there that won't do that, right? And no one should pay first on these services. Real estate services are paid after, okay? Those funds are to be held in a trust account and can only be received by mortgage agents that have access to a trust account, which not all brokerages do. And you are able to ask for a record of those funds being held in trust until closing. Right? The key thing to know about funds that are held in trust, right? And this is anytime you have even a deposit with a landlord, right? Is you are entitled to the interest earned on those trust funds, right? For the period of time they're held in trust. That's your money, not theirs, right? So keep that in mind as well. But if a broker charges you up front, fire them immediately.
Yeah.
If a broker charges you 2%, 3%, 4% of the mortgage cost, fire them immediately.
Absolutely.
This is absolutely outside of industry standard, right? And it pisses me right off, because what I see a lot of in the private side, right, is we deal with lenders that charge 2%, 3%, 4% fees, right? Great, and there are situationals on this, and it's typically not a first position mortgage we're dealing with in that scenario. But if you see that you've been charged $30,000 by the lender, and the broker's charging you $30,000 on top of that, there's a huge problem, because the broker didn't do $30,000 worth of work. 100%, right?
Absolutely.
Now, commercial mortgages, construction financing, agricultural mortgages, we're putting those off to the side, right? We're purely talking residential today. Okay.
No, absolutely. And this 0.5%, 0.4%, 0.3%, or 1%, 2% on privates that the broker sometimes charges is because these lenders are unlike popular belief that, oh, he's putting me in B lender, he must be making a lot of money. I actually tell my clients that I'm actually making less money, right? So, it's not about making more money. B lenders actually give you less money, and usually it's half of what you get on an A lender. So there's no.
Well, it should be, because I'm turning that deal every 2-3 years, right? So I'm gonna touch it more often, and I'm gonna get paid on it more often, versus the bank lender, where I might only do your deal every 3, 4, 5 years. And so you know what? If they pay me a little bit more, great. That's out of their profit margin. It's not out of your pocket, right? And so you have to be so careful about predatory brokers.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the things, Matthew, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm relatively not as old in the industry, but what I hear is that sometimes there are certain, and one red flag that I always had when I was buying, let me just talk from a consumer point of view, was that when a mortgage agent says that, it'll be done, or you don't have to worry about it, or, it's my fucking money. Right. Yeah. So I'm putting the down payment. It's my house. It's my income. It's my signatures on the mortgage commitment. It's me who is on the line, because it's my money, my house. Right. Absolutely. I need to know every single thing of how things are happening, and I need to understand. I actually set up a call with my clients when I'm doing a signing package, and any client who actually signs before I set up the call, I actually call them and said, you were not supposed to do that. And sometimes people say, oh, no, Navjot, I believe you, but that's okay, right? But I still need to be able to explain to them what's going on with their mortgage, and that's really important. And that's the red flag that I have. Absolutely. Matthew, before we get into the questions, we have a couple of very good ones. I also wanted to touch upon and that's a topic that's very touchy for a lot of people, but I'll still go ahead and say that, right? So a lot of people actually knowingly, like a lot of buyers knowingly get into this, right? Because they wanted that dream house as their first house. They make enough money on the side and they don't have 2 years of whatever, and they don't want to pay the 1% lender fee on the alternate lending. They don't want to, pay higher interest rates. And therefore, if some angel comes and says, oh, you know what, you can actually buy the house, leave it to me. They then, not knowing fully what the repercussions could be, get into it because someone else is doing it, and they feel that if anyone is caught, only the mortgage broker would be at fault, and they'll be the one. So I just wanted to you to give some perspective on like as a buyer.
So lying to a bank is a felony, first and foremost, right? It's a financial crime. It is a white collar crime, but it carries high fees and potential jail time. I'll be honest with you, there has not been enough focus in Canada over the past couple of years about cracking down against white collar crime. Right? We know this, right? However, lenders are not stupid. And I've worked at a lender before. I did my time there working at them, and they have a department called audit. And audit's job is to review every document in detail after the mortgage funds. Okay. And so even if you close, and we've seen this before, audit can come back later and say, listen, this is in violation. We're calling the mortgage. Because every lender has a clause in their commitment that says, essentially, to dumb it down, if you lied to us, give us our money back.
Right.
It's right there. You have signed attestations at the lawyers, to the broker, every step of the way, that the information I've provided to you is honest and true, right? Failure to adhere to that, failure to adhere to purpose of a mortgage, right? One of the biggest frauds that happens is I'm coming in to buy this as an owner occupied, and oops, I'm turning it into a rental, right? Right. If the lender does a drive-by, and keep in mind, they do drive-bys, and it's now a rental property, they can call your mortgage in at any time, right?
Right.
They have within that term the ability to call your mortgage in if you put secondary financing behind it, and they said strictly no, you cannot put a second mortgage behind. If they pull title and see a registration of a second mortgage, they can call it in, right? So that's the most common forms of fraud that we see. Is the lenders gave us this agreement, they stipulated these conditions, and somewhere along the line we weren't honest about adhering to them, right?
And it's not just at the time of compliance, even at the time of renewal, even during the course of the mortgage. Absolutely. If they come to know by any means that there was some kind of a lie, whether it's saying that you have a job but you didn't, whether it's saying that you lost your job just before closing, and the file was instructed or whatever, right? So I think all that actually construes to you can actually lose your mortgage.
Up to the point that the mortgage closes, what I say should be honest, right?
Absolutely.
If 2 years in, I'm upgrading my home and I'm changing my existing to a rental and I'm buying a new owner occupied, that's fine, cool, right? But I'm not renewing that mortgage or refinancing that previous mortgage as if it were still in owner occupied, right? Now I'm going to have to refinance that mortgage into rental terms, right?
As a rental, absolutely.
Exactly. So, I mean, yes, there are little things that you can get around, and we call this the gray area, right? And that's fine. It's okay to be in the gray area, right? We know what you're allowed to and not allowed to do, right? What's wrong is to outright provide incorrect information.
No,
And you know, and the thing is, eventually these brokers do get caught. Eventually they get found out because when I was working at the lender, I had a broker, and in the course of 1 year he did about 20 some odd fraudulent files. And it wasn't until number 22, number 23 came in that they found that it was fraud, and it was good fraud. Like these were well manufactured documents, but there was a slip up on one, and then everything got pulled and he got red X'd. And so there's a term called red Xing in the industry. And if I file a red X against you, you will never work in finances again. You're done.
And can they, and I don't know if you would know that, but maybe you do, but can they pull record? So when they do the audit, so at the 22nd mortgage, you found out that this broker is creating fraudulent documents, and then they do an audit on each and every file.
They're going to look at everything. Yeah, they'll look at everything in the history, right? They may not go after the clients at that point, but the broker is definitely going to be out of business. That's for sure.
All right. So yeah.
But that's their discretion if they wish to pursue legal action at that point, right?
Yeah, and they can go after the client.
There's that, and then there's the emotional exhaustion of the living under having done this, right? Because you could always be in trouble.
Yeah.
It's not like financial crimes go away.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so that's a struggle.
Yeah, so we have some questions, Matthew. So the first one, let me just ask that. Do you think mortgage fraud has been going around for a long period of time, and it just happened at an extremely high level during 2020 and 2021, and thus being highlighted by CBC now? Do you think it will be harder for customers to trust mortgage agents moving forward, or this news would have minimal effect?
So mortgage fraud's been around as long as mortgages have been around. I'll say that right away. Since banks have been around, there's been bank fraud. Since mortgages have been around, there's been mortgage fraud. Everyone learns how to game the systems some way, and there are those that won't play by the rules, period. Is it getting worse? It's getting easier. Technology gets better. It's easier to fabricate documents. Working at a distance, in the past when you had to sit across from me, my due diligence was significantly better because I could just read your body language and see if something was up, right? I'm looking at your raw documents in front of me. I'm not looking at PDFs of them, right? So yeah, it was harder to get bad stuff across the table when you had to sit face to face with me, right? Now that everything's digital, now that our conversations are digital, sure, it's a little trickier, right? But bad docs are generally bad docs. I can tell by calling on a job letter 9 times out of 10 if it's a fake job.
Yeah. Do you think it will be harder for people to trust mortgage agents moving forward after this news?
I hope that nobody trusts anyone without earning that trust.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, you'll know who the good ones are right off, with very little work, right? Look at the content they put out, right? There's no reason for mortgage professionals today not to be creating some form of educational content and putting it out there. Use that to gauge the trustworthiness of them, whether it's written, whether it's on their website, whether it's their YouTube channels, right? But look at the content being produced by the people you're going to work at and judge them based on their honesty and forthcomingness on that. There's a great generation of outstanding people entering the industry within the past couple of years that are coming with a transparency and a credibility and values that bring a tear to my eye, because boy, I wish those were there for my whole career, but we'll deal with it today. I think there's, in this younger generation of agents, there is a fed upness with the way things had been done.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Matthew. And, I'll give you an analogy, it's a real example. So I had 2 clients. One came to me in December last year, and one came to me, I think it was March this year. Yeah. Now, when I me, I actually say, go make more money, right? In a very nice,
snarky little way that I love.
you have no business earning $80,000, try to get a better salary, right? And then we talk mortgage, right? And I'm very ruthless in saying that in a very nice way, but I do say that. Now, I said that in December to a person, and he was pissed at me. Never reached out to me. I don't know, where he went, but he did get a house, right? And then there was another person who reached out to me in March, and I told him the same thing. He reached out to me again in July, saying that I was making $80,000 for the last 4 years as a software developer. You told me to make more money. Now I'm making $140,000. So first of all, thank you for moving off making that $80,000 and moving. I was being in a slumber when I was worth a lot more, and now we can get a mortgage, and now we close that mortgage, right? That
and here's the cool line, Nav. He can afford that mortgage.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the part we forget and we gloss over way too much. Is you can lie on how much money you make, but at the end of the day, the bills still due.
Yeah.
Right. And if I make $5,000 and my mortgage costs $4,000, $1,000 is a bad budget to live on.
Yeah.
Especially today.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think it's, what we're trying to say here for everyone is that it's okay to delay your decision. It's okay to explore how to, and again, Matthew, a lot of things, and the reason why I joined Valco Financial and I joined Matthew was that I wanted to understand policy better, because there are, products out there are mortgages out there. Just for instance, some people come to me with work permits, and they say that, oh, we have to do a 35% down payment. No. You can buy a house with 5% down payment. There are actual rules and policies around you being able to buy with 5% down payment. However, you will have to pay an NRST of 20%. That's not the same as saying you have to do a 35% down. Yeah. So I think there's a lack of information out there on products as well. And that's where, all these things, all these shortcuts, all these, jugaad, like we say in India, they come up. And they sometimes make me angry, but it makes me sad as well, because, it's not required.
These individuals are preying on the fact that you're probably naive of, the rules that are out there. And so they don't think for 1 second they're trying to help you. They're not. They're trying to make money. They're trying to take advantage of you, right? Under no situation has anyone offered to commit fraud on your behalf for your interest.
Yeah.
I'm telling you that dead out. They did it because they're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. They're going to take advantage of you, period. Right. Yeah. That's why they do it. No one cares that, you're a family of 4 struggling to find a home. Right. And you need to make just a little bit more money. No, they're going to find a way. I can charge these people an exorbitant fee to get them into a house. They're going to think I did amazing, and I'm going to walk away laughing because, I just did an easy job and made a crap load of money, right?
Yeah. And they never call back to ask whether they're okay, right? So
they will never do follow-up. They will never they will never be there to get you out of the situation that they put you into.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Another good question here. What all things we need to verify for broker in the database?
Yeah. The first thing is that every mortgage agent has a mortgage ID number, right? Mine's M0900000161, right? Tells you I was the 161st agent that was licensed in 2009. Every brokerage has a FSRA or their oversight body ID. Okay, this needs to be findable. Okay?
Yeah. And it's available online, right? Absolutely. Like if you search me. Yep. On, I think it's the FSRA website, or maybe it's the MPC. But on one of those websites, if you search, my name, you will find my license number.
Yeah.
If you search my license number, you will find my name attached. Right?
On MPC, which is the Mortgage Professionals Canada, which is one of the legislative lobbying bodies, on Dominion Lending Center's national search, they'll find you, because that's the brokerage house we belong to, right? On the brokerage's website, you should probably be there. At some point or another, unless you're a brand new agent, you should probably be there, right? So it's one of those things that, do some due diligence. They'll be out there. Any website that Nav has, needs to have his mortgage ID on it.
And
Period.
I've been given a lot of beating around because in the beginning I had multiple things, and I was getting called by the compliance and said, "Oh, you don't have your number, you don't have this, you don't have." Okay,
Oh yeah.
that's why my Instagram looks so ugly when you
Yep.
look at my.
Oh yeah.
But
A
at the
mortgage
same time,
agent's social media should look like Nav's, where
yeah,
it has all this information: who he works for, what his ID is, what the brokerage number is, right? These things are super important.
no, absolutely. Regarding mortgage fraud, fake documents, there is general perception everyone does it. What are your thoughts on how widespread is it in Canada?
Yeah. I think the majority of people do not do it.
Mm.
I think, I think that when it comes to fraud for shelter, it's actually a small number of people that do it. With the lie that they tell themselves that everybody does it, right? To make them feel like I'm not being a terrible person when you really are, in a way, right?
Yeah.
You're setting yourself up for failure from the get-go. And so you're saying, well, everyone does it. Everyone does it. That's fine. It's fine. It's the same as it's similar. Like, you go jaywalk because everyone jaywalks, right? Well, except for that guy that got hit by the car, right? It's those type of things. The rules are there to protect people, right? And I'm very much a by the rule type person, right? And it's allowed me to comfortably play in the most dangerous of the mortgage spaces, right? Because I only do private lending, right? And so, it's the highest risk, space that I work in, right? Well, the rules are there for a reason, right? To protect, so no, not everybody does it. And there's the second type of fraud that I'm not really going to talk about it so much is fraud for profit. And that's money laundering, criminal activities, right? And so what we're focused today is fraud for shelter, right? And no, very few people actually do it.
All right, perfect. Quick question: why realtors say nowadays it's a buyer's market?
It's a balanced market, if anything.
Yeah, it's a balanced market.
Some areas are still sellers markets. Keep in mind, most realtors have not been in the industry long enough to even know what a buyer's market looks like.
Yeah.
The majority of realtors in Canada have less than 5 years of experience. They haven't really seen a buyer's market, right? Most areas are imbalanced. Some are still in sellers, because what it has to do with is how many months of inventory is available.
Right.
And right now, with decreasing prices, guess what? There's not a lot of on the market. Inventory, right? And people are still buying houses.
Yeah.
And people who don't have to sell aren't selling.
Right.
So this is going to come to a pressure point, right? So what's happening right now is that the rental market is taking the brunt of the damage from what we see right now. That's why you see rental prices increasing significantly, right? This will hit a breaking point where people will say simply, screw it. I'm going to figure out how to buy a house, irregardless of interest rate.
Yeah.
Right. One of the economists that I highly respect, Benjamin Tal, he's the deputy chief economist for CIBC, focusing on macro global markets, right? He had a really good point over the weekend when he was talking, and he said that what we're seeing right now is the payment due for people borrowing their futures back during the height of the pandemic and during the height of that market. So we saw 20 to 30% above normal. Well, these were just people that came into the market early.
Yeah.
Right? They got into the market at all costs early while interest rates were super low, right? So now those buyers who would have bought this year aren't buying. They already bought, right? So there's going to always, after every height, there's always a dip while the markets rebalance themselves out a bit. So is it a buyer's market now? In some neighborhoods, maybe, but we've got a lot of work to reach that point.
Absolutely.
Bank mortgage better than private lenders? Sure, for most people. Private lending has its purpose, right? Um, Private lending doesn't have debt servicing ratios, for example. So when I'm an investor type, right, and maybe I've got a bunch of properties and my debt servicing looks way off the charts as far as a bank's concerned, a private lender is going to look at my equity position and say, sure, let's go,
Yeah.
right? Maybe I don't want to go and, I own 4 different corporations. Maybe it's going to be way too much of a hassle to start putting that information on paper, right?
Right.
And bringing it all to a bank rep who may not understand what they're looking at today, right? Maybe for a short-term purchase, maybe I'm just going to be in and out within a year. It makes more sense for me to go private, right? Maybe I don't want to make a mortgage payment. I'd like them to capitalize all the costs, all the monthly payments right up front. I can do that with private lending, right? So private lending's got its place, but it's not to be jumped in without guidance and support. So, when I'm training agents, I don't let them private lend without me for the first 2 years of their career. Right? I have to, unless they've got an experienced underwriter that they're working with, I won't let them do any private deals for the first 2 years without me oversight, right? Because they are not good for most people, just as a blanket term, right? If you're being directed towards a private loan, when a bank loan or an alternative financing solution would have been the correct option, you're getting really bad advice,
right?
Because someone's trying to make money off you at that point. Now, if I've explored the bank option and I've explored the alternative option and I've proven to you, and I should prove to you through some form of correspondence or whatnot, that I have been declined by them and cannot get financing that way, then let me come to you with a private solution and let's see if it makes sense for you financially.
Makes sense. And a lot of times, and I'll just put a twist to this, a lot of times people want to buy their dream house, but they can't buy it with a bank. And therefore, they resort to fraud because they want to save on the 1% lender fee, or they don't have the 20% down. Just don't buy.
Yeah.
If you're a first-time home buyer, just wait. It's okay.
Find an in-between place, build up to it, get a condo, turn it into a rental, sell it for more a couple years later, right?
Do house hacking, right? Partner with someone, right? So there's so many other things. And, whenever someone, calls me, and there are a lot of calls where I say that you are not ready to buy. I've had 2 of those calls today, right? Where I said that, the person was too leveraged and there's probably a recession coming. It's inevitable. And there's a recession coming. And I told him that you first need to get, okay on the other 2 mortgages that you have with your alternate lenders because someone screwed up, and then think of buying your 3rd house, right? Because your mortgage is up, early 2023, and your house is not worth, what you want. Just a bit out of subject question, then how without mortgage fraud people are able to buy multiple properties?
Yeah. So we touched on that a little bit. So, first off, they don't overbuy. Right. Yeah. So people buy within what their portfolio can manage with the funds that are available in it. Right. So as I'm adding properties, they need to cash flow. Right. And anyone that says that you can buy property that is cash flow neutral or cash flow negative, and that's your portfolio, is full of shit. Right. You're going to have to find a way to cash flow your properties. Right. Whether it means that you're doing short-term rentals and Airbnb and building that kind of a business, whether, you've got multi-unit properties and they are generating different sources of revenue based on the components that are within it, right? They need to cash flow so that on paper, they are trying to do a net zero, right? Yeah. That they don't positively impact you, but they don't negatively impact you, right? That's the key. Then you can leverage. Like I leverage from my properties. I have a HELOC on them and I borrow off the properties, and that's fine, right? But HELOCs are debt serviced, right? They're well within my servicing ratios, and I pay them down with time, right? And then you don't buy too quickly. You buy within the speed that you close one property, you set it up, you get it in order, you do your stuff on it. Then you look for the next, right? You don't do 3 or 4 properties in one shot. Now, that's unless your business is to be a real estate investor, right? There's a different story that happens when I'm using other people's money to build a portfolio, right? So, if I'm going to go and play Grant Cardone today, I'm not doing it with my dollars. I'm doing it with all of your dollars, right?
Right.
So I'm playing by a whole different set of rules at that point, and I'm not dealing with the residential properties anymore. I'm dealing with commercial properties, and that's a whole different story, right? But when you're dealing residential properties, right, there's a limit to the amount that you can do, right? So banks, you're owner occupied plus 4, the maximum you're allowed to have, right? Per financial institution, typically, right? Alternative lenders, credit unions might take you up to 10 in a portfolio, right? Private lenders don't care.
Yeah.
How many lines on an Excel sheet, right? Have fun, right? Generally speaking, that's how residential is treated, right? They limit the amount that you're allowed to do in each way. Each lender looks at things a little different, how they calculate properties. This is why when you're trying to build a portfolio, you work with an expert, right? Who knows, this is how Scotia treats properties. This is how TD treats properties, right? This is how Manulife treats properties. This is how, Northern Credit Union treats properties, right? Because it's not just banks, there's credit unions at play, right? There's all kinds of lenders that you didn't think of when you sat down that we look at in order to see where your financing options are, right? Here's the golden ticket to real estate investing, and I'll make it super easy and everybody can strive for this. And all the rules change when you have $1 million cash.
Yeah.
So if you have $1 million in liquidable assets, sitting in ETF stocks, whatever, right? All the rules change, right? You now are what's called high net worth at that point. And it's generally about $1 million in cash. And I say cash loosely, right? Non-registered investments, yada, yada, yada. Not equity in your property.
Yeah.
Right? Not equity, right? Then you play by a whole different set of rules.
Right.
So the goal of any investor should be to get $1 million in cash. Then I get to do all kinds of fun stuff, because then I can start leveraging my cash assets for greater terms.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different story.
Yeah, most of us are a little bit away.
No, but strive towards it, right? If you want to be, if you're trying to be an investor, try to get that cash built. So that's why you can't just buy real estate and forsake the other forms of investing, right? They have to be done together.
Or try to buy multi-units, because I think it's over 4 units. The cash flow from those units matter less than your income, right? So that's why a lot of investors move into multi-unit investing. And when I say multi-unit, it's not duplex, right? It's like 4 units plus, not even 4 units, like 5 units plus. And then you play with a very different set of rules. And yeah, that's another thing that we can do. Can one change the mortgage agent while staying with the financial institution? Yeah,
absolutely. So there's a couple caveats to this. If the mortgage agent has submitted an application to TD, you cannot deal with TD from a different source. That's the same thing. If a mortgage agent has submitted a deal to TD, you cannot walk into a TD branch and get the mortgage done with TD anymore, until said mortgage agent actively cancels the file. Likewise, if you walked into a TD branch and start an application there, the mortgage agent cannot submit to them until the branch cancels. Okay, so that's a caveat. That rule does not hold true to Scotiabank, HSBC, other financial institutions. It's purely a TD weirdness, right? But yeah, normally what's going to happen is that there will be a question from the institution as to why the change happened, right? If there's a live deal, they're going to ask for it to be canceled some way, shape, or form, because they don't want to have the same tag on money in 2 different sources, right? There's going to have to be some sort of explanation as to why the change, right?
One thing that I would want to address, Matthew, and I think that's where the question is coming from. Some brokers, would actually say that you can't cancel a mortgage because the commitment has been signed.
Some brokers lie.
And that's wrong, because there's an engagement letter that, if you are a client and you are on the call or you're watching on YouTube, you would know that there's an engagement letter that's signed. And if you read that document, it says that, there are certain things if you don't like. And for me, if you don't like my service, you don't work with me, because I don't deserve to have my client, right? So I'm very clear. If you don't like me, if you get something better, whatever, right, I'm not going to hold you responsible for anything. So just know your rights. It's important as first time home buyers to know your rights, and if you are not liking the service, move out.
But if a mortgage agent ever makes you sign an exclusivity, walk away. This is for residential. Again, exclusivities on commercial, different story, right? But just don't deal with them. They're a crappy mortgage agent. They're not trying to earn your business through their service. They're trying to lock you down with a contract. Not how we do business, right? What you want is a engagement letter that tells you how you can cancel your relationships with each other, right? How to walk away, what the expectations are. Have it all laid out clearly from the get-go so that you know what kind of relationship you're going to have with each other from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. Discuss about rising inflation and how it is impacting people across Canada.
Oof. Well,
let's also give this a little bit of a color, because we are talking about mortgage fraud. So people who did get away with it, they had the, I think they'll be the ones who will be going into foreclosure sooner.
Well, and that's the thing. The people that are really crying about the pain of inflation and prices, interest rate increases and things like that, are the ones that are over leveraged to begin with, right? And I know it's from a position of being blessed that I say that it's not such a big impact in my day-to-day life, and I don't think about inflation outside of work stuff. But for those that are in line with their numbers, that are not over leveraged, that are in good situations, we're sitting here counting our dollars, starting to invest, right? You're positioned to take advantage of bad markets like this, right? And I think inflation hurts those that put themselves in the position where it would hurt themselves.
Absolutely. And preparing now is important, because we are still not in recession. We are still unemployment rates are not bad, even though I now hear in my circle people are losing jobs, but still it's not as bad, and it's important to prepare today. Now, what, Matthew, and I know this, but we are just talking about, other people here. So what's the repercussion on the mortgage agent if they commit fraud, and if they are caught, and if they are reported?
At bare bones minimum, I lose my job. What should happen is I lose my job and I lose my ability to transact in mortgages or in financial services for the rest of my life, and get the ban from it. In the most in the worst cases, I should be in jail.
Yeah. It's basically up to 2 years of jail, $50,000 in fines, and you lose your license. One or all three of them. Decided by the committee.
And I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's so short-sighted. Maybe I make $1 million in a year, right?
Yeah.
Doing fraudulent mortgages. Maybe I do that, right? But how many more years can I be making, 400,000, 500,000 doing finance really well, that I throw it all away for one good year? No. So here's what I would encourage people to do, is if someone offers to commit fraud on your behalf, that you report them.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Get them out of the industry. Make it cleaner for everyone else, right?
I have a very interesting question here. So thank you for the great insights, Nav and Matthew. My question is, for the first-time home buyer, first-time single, it's a single family, single income home buyer, earning $60,000 a year, is there any way to ever get a house? Because currently even one-bed condo looks too far. Is changing provinces the only option left?
So that's hard, right? Being a single home income at 60 grand a year, right? That's rough. So question number one, is there a way to increase the income somehow? Right? That's always the first question to ask. Can we make more money? Right?
Yeah.
Question number two, is there a possible cosigner? Right? Is there that hero in the corner, in your corner, that's willing to step forward and help? Right? Legitimately. Two. Okay. Three, maybe it's a different city and not a different province. Right? Maybe your realtor is not looking at the right properties for you, right? Maybe a condo isn't the right choice because condos are actually more expensive per capita than homes,
Right.
So, and this is the kicker, right? A condo is easier to afford once you're in it because the condo fee works in your advantage, right? But sometimes if you're out in the market, that condo fee works against your affordability, and maybe what you need is the small bungalow with the basement suite to add the affordability, right?
I think a couple of questions were asked around the overall market. Like, is Canadian?
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's been fun. Oh man.
Yeah. So is Canadian real estate heading towards recession?
So
real estate.
So
right?
let's kind of divide this up a bit, right? Because this is fun stuff, and we might run a little over if you get me going on this, I'm afraid. So the Canadian market as a whole is probably running to a new breed of a recession. Because the recession that we're going to will not look like, in my opinion, the recessions that we've had. All right. Because there's a couple major things at play. Typically, recessions involve a contraction in the job markets. And I don't think we're going to see that because we have such a labor shortage to begin with, right? What would drive us into a historically correct recession is if someone released robot laborers into the market really quickly. Automated labor into the market really quickly. But there's a huge labor market that's hungry for employees right now. And we can't satiate that hunger, right? So if I lost my white collar job today, right? If I lost my job today, I'd be in school learning to be an electrician tomorrow. No offense or buts about it, right? I would go learn how to be a plumber tomorrow. I would get into a trade tomorrow because there is no possibility through immigration alone that we can make up for the lack of trade jobs out there today.
That's true.
So, and then I'm as princessy as it comes. I hate getting dirt under my nails. I am not someone who wants to do that crap, but it's $100,000 a year, so I'm going to learn how to do it, if things hit the fan, right? So do I think there's going to be contractions in some employment markets? Absolutely, right? The ones that normally suffer when we see downturns, which is going to be tech, right? I'm sorry to, the counter side to getting paid $200,000-$300,000 is that there's some instability that comes alongside it because they're heavily stock market driven employment fields, right? But I think generally speaking, we're going to see a recession in which employment can be stable. Our recessionary impact, it's hard because recession is 2 quarters or more of contraction of GDP, right? Now, will the Bank of Canada throw us into a recession on purpose? Yeah, hands down. To fight inflation, they will absolutely create an artificial recession, right?
Because the alternative is a depreciating currency, right? Which is much more painful than dealing with a recession. So
absolutely. And the only way to offset depreciating currency is to begin doing interest rate hikes combined with all kinds of other economic mechanisms that we just don't want to play with, right? Now, our recession is something that we should celebrate? Absolutely not, because they kill people literally, all right?
But should you be sitting on piles of cash? Absolutely, yes.
If you're sitting on piles of cash, be joyful that you can invest it, right?
Yeah.
Smartly, right? But recessions are bad. They are not a good thing. More people make money because of because it creates an opportunity to invest for those that have money, right? So it does the same thing. It's a financial transfer already back to the wealthy from
100%. The divide just increases every recession. And that's
absolutely,
that, right?
absolutely. Is it a great time to become creative and develop new businesses and new business ideas? Absolutely, right? Because what's going to happen is you're going to build your business in a time in which money's expensive, and then money's going to get cheap again.
Yeah.
And then you can expand your business in the cheap market, right?
Yeah.
So you can definitely use the system to your advantage. Now, housing is going to be a whole different animal, right? And then this is where we're wrong. And I think a lot of people are wrong. And I'll admit, you can come back to me in a year and say, hey, Matt, you're full of shit here. And I'll be okay with that. Right. But my belief is that what we're seeing is just a deep breath in the market. It's just pausing for a minute because it went so crazy. It went so out of control. And I don't think we're seeing a correction. I don't think we're seeing a bubble pop. I don't think we're seeing any of that stuff. I think we're just seeing a deep breath moment where markets are going to come down a little bit because nobody's doing anything, right? But it hasn't solved the underlying problem that there's no inventory compared to the number of people that are here. So Canada's gaining its population per capita 6 times faster than the US.
Yeah.
In the first half of 2022, we brought in enough people combining immigration and refugees, right, to put us on track for 600,000 new Canadians this year.
Yeah.
What I can guarantee you we do not have are 600,000 homes coming to completion.
And that's where we now see bidding on rents.
Yes.
Just imagine, like in January, that was crazy, houses being listed for 500, being sold for 900. Now houses are listed on rent for 2,400 and they're going for 28, 2,900 in Square One.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, right? That actually calls for a supply shortage. Now, just because a person who is associated with real estate, which is Matt and I, and we stand to gain from it, it's not why we are saying it. The numbers say there are 14.6 million dwellings in Canada, and we are on track to be 40 million, a population of 40 million. That's almost 2.72 people per dwelling. And the average dwelling size is less than 2.5.
Yeah.
That 2.72, 2.73, whatever that is, and 2.5 amounts for 1.5 million housing shortage.
Yeah. Math doesn't typically lie, unfortunately.
Exactly. And if you look at US, and this is a video that I'm making, that's why I know these numbers off the back of my head. This 2.72 number that we have for for Canada, which is the number of people divided by the number of dwellings. This is 2.3 for all other developing countries, which does not have an imbalance in their real estate. Yeah. So that's very much a supply issue, and that is being seen in rents right now.
Well, and it's there's reasons why there's supply issues in Canada too, right? So you look at Canada and you're like, oh, there's so much land here, right? How can there be land issues? Well, how much of it do you actually want to live in?
Yeah.
Right? Most of Canada's crap to live in, right? Only about 10 to 20 kilometers north of the US border is habitable.
Yeah.
All year, right? So Canada's not highly habitable, right? It's hard to build outside of this little zone that exists, right? Because there's no infrastructure. I can't just go north and build a house, 2 hours north of Toronto in the random location because there's no infrastructure there. How are you going to build? Where's it going to go, right? So that's a huge issue. 2, we can only build 10 months out of 12.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but it is a big deal. When you're talking about you lose a section of your construction time. Yeah, you know what? In Florida, I can build 12 months out of 12 months, right? In almost anywhere in the United States, I can build 12 months of the year, right? Except for some of the Midwest, right? In Canada, almost universally everywhere, it can only build between 8 and 10 months out of the year, right? I have a trade person shortage that's extreme at this point. So getting tradespeople is absolutely the hardest thing on the planet to do. I don't have anyone to build my houses. Right? And then number 4 is municipal levies have gotten so greedy that the cost to actually get things through to build is impossible. And it's a combination of not in my backyard. I live in a small, single family detached home neighborhood. I don't want an apartment here. I don't want those renters here, right? Stupid people, not in my backyard, right? I have words with them. I don't hold back on that. I think they're idiots. They're short-sighted. There's tax revenue that you want, you freaking moron. You want a better school? Build a big apartment complex. Get the money in, right? And the cities have made it impossible to grow. So what you have to do is you have to fire every freaking city councilor, replace them with people that are growth-minded, right? Tell every old person to shut up, their opinion doesn't matter, and start actually forcing construction to happen. Get the cities to own their own buildings, right? If Toronto want, and we were... There's I'm not going to get super political here, but if Toronto wants to actually build affordable housing, then Toronto should put the money up and go and freaking build affordable housing and make money off it.
Yeah.
We have the land, we have the space. Go buy up a dilapidated section of the city and put some municipal housing on it, own it, socialize it, make money off commercial spaces, make some rent off it, rebuild it, and, continue doing that. It's okay to have nationalized housing. Surprise, surprise, And I can tell you right now, I ain't no communist. I'm barely a socialist. I like capitalism and I love making money, right? But there's a need for it because not everything should be profit driven. That's the government's job, is to not be profit driven. So, we'll do that bit, I could keep going on this for a little while.
we need another webinar.
There is one comment here I really do want to address because it pisses me off.
Sure, go ahead.
And we've got some laughter going on here, and that's great. But this last little comment here, why the need for mortgage? Why can't people buy a home without getting to mortgage? Do you have $1 million cash? Stupid. No, you don't go dollar for dollar into anything, right? We have the benefit of leveraging 5 to 1, 20 to 1, 10 to 1, whatever, right? And we have had the benefit of doing this for a very long time, and the system has been tested and gone through trials and changes and grows and evolves like any entity should. And the markets have pushed it in a more positive direction than in the time when I would have owned everything and you would have paid me rent to work my land. This system is better than feudalism.
Yeah.
This system is better than a caste system where someone owns everything and they own you, right? So you know what? This is how we buy a home here, right? This is how it works. The banks are out there to make profit. Yes. So am I, so are you, so is everybody, right? The entire purpose of work is to make some money, right? And then you
work for free.
Money back.
Would you ever work for free for your employer? No. Why would I, right? So
then you put that money back into the system. Then that money gets rolled through. The bank doesn't just sit on profit, right? They pay out dividends to people that invest in them. They reinvest that money into new lending opportunities. They provide startup loans for small businesses and lines of credit. Do they make money? Sure, right? But on a mortgage, guess how much they're making, typically speaking? 1%, 2%, 3%. It's not a lot because they pay the Bank of Canada, then they charge a difference in between. They make maybe 2 or 3% on a mortgage, right? That's not their moneymaker. Where you want to be yelling at them is bank fees. Right? You want bank fees, right? And then The last thing, is it a big mess you can't come out of easily? No, there's exit policies. Just get into the right mortgage.
Yeah.
Easy peasy, get the right advice, get into the right product, have a game plan, don't over leverage, be smart as you go through life, right? I've got people like, don't tell me, don't explain this. I get that, right? But I feel like we go through life with so many of this noise, so much of this noise and this negativity and this scarcity mindset, right? That drives us towards looking at everything like it's unfair towards us. And you know what? Educate yourself in the system and play within the rules to use it for your advantage, right? Rich people generally become rich for three reasons, right? One, they inherit it, right? Two, they cheated for it. Or three, they just knew all the rules.
Yeah.
Right? And that'll be the end of my rant for tonight. You asked me to bring some fire to the table, Navja. It's your fault.
No, I loved it. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who are here loved it too. So thank you so much, Matthew, for being here. Thank you so much for the 23 people who made it till the end. The very thing that you are here, and I can see a little, couple of realtors as well on this call. The very reason that you are here and you wanted to learn about this and you wanted, a point of view shows that, you are making an honest buck. You want to make an honest living and you deeply care about this matter, as much as, I do and Matthew does and a lot of people on this call do. So thank you so much for doing all that. And thank you so much for being here. We'll meet again next weekend, hopefully.
We'll see you guys soon,
but yeah, thank you so much.
No problem.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.